You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. Protesters in Bangladesh are planning a long march to Dhaka today as demonstrators clashed with the police over the weekend. Dozens of police were reported injured. Dozens of people, meanwhile, were reported dead and many more arrested in the unrest, which has evolved from a student-led protest over job quotas to a broad anti-government movement. Tensions have heightened. As far as the UK is concerned, far-right protesters have clashed with the police there. There's a hotel which had asylum seekers that was attacked. The violence has now spread to other cities. Tensions have heightened in the Middle East, with the US moving warships to the region to defend Israel if Iran attacks, while several Western governments urgently told their citizens to leave Lebanon as Hezbollah launched a barrage of strikes targeting Israel. Almost since the war began, Ukraine has worked to acquire F-16s from its allies and train pilots to fly them. Now, they're finally taking flight. The Ukrainian president has shared a video showing the new F-16s taking off, calling the moment a new phase for development for the Air Force in Ukraine. Kamala Harris interviewed 3 VP contenders after she became the official Democratic presidential nominee. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly met with Kamala Harris in D.C., and she is expected to announce her choice imminently. Well, our big focus. Over 90 people have been killed in Bangladesh as clashes erupted between police and anti-government protesters who are now demanding that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina step down. Sheikh Hasina said that those engaging in sabotage across Bangladesh in the name of protests are not students but terrorists, and asked people to suppress them with a firm hand. But the protesters have dismissed Ms. Hasina's invitation for dialogue aimed at quelling escalating violence and consolidated their demands into a unified call for the government's resignation. While Sheikh Hasina's government has been accused by rights groups of misusing state institutions to entrench their hold on power and stamp out dissent, well, only the next few days will tell us how much trouble Ms. Hasina is in. With that, let's turn our attention now to the UK, where Prime Minister Keir Starmer has strongly condemned an attack on a hotel housing asylum seekers that saw at least 10 police officers injured, one seriously, describing it as far-right thuggery. In a statement from 10 Downing Street on Sunday afternoon, the British Prime Minister vowed that the authorities will do whatever it takes to bring these thugs to justice, and that justice will be swift. But terrifying footage from Rotherham showed masked far-right protesters kicking out windows to storm the Holiday Inn Express, as you can see on your screens at the moment. These are visuals that we have accessed from Rotherham. The Holiday Inn Express that is being attacked housed migrants. Now, elsewhere in the United Kingdom, the atmosphere was also tense. In the northeast town of Middlesbrough, protesters broke free of a police cordon, and as protests began in Bolton near Manchester, police said that a dispersal notice had been authorized to give officers extra powers to tackle antisocial behavior. But police officials in the UK have said many of the actions are being organized online by shadowy far-right groups who are mobilizing support with phrases like "enough is enough," "save our kids" and "stop the boats." They are actually tapping into a narrative amplified by right-wing media outlets and commentators about the scale of immigration in the UK, in particular migrants and refugees arriving in small boats from France across the English Channel. But Mr. Starmer's statement came as more violence broke out across the UK in the wake of a stabbing rampage at a dance class that left 3 girls dead and many more wounded. Well, for further clarity on what's happening in the UK, we have with us Nicholas Nugent at the moment. Thanks so much, Nick, for making time for us as always. Reports indicate that the recent riots in the UK were actually fueled by misinformation about the identity of a murder suspect, with some actually claiming that he was a Muslim immigrant. Critics, meanwhile, have repeatedly pointed out that the spread of misinformation and the amplification of xenophobic rhetoric about immigrants, as well as minority communities in the UK, has led to the current outbreak of violence. But Nick, are anti-immigrant sentiments now making a comeback in the UK?
You're right that the spreading of the suggestion that the killer of these children was a Muslim first triggered the riots, and the first targets were mosques in the first day or two. But it's subsequently transmogrified into a wider protest against foreigners, against immigrants in general. Even the burning down of some shops owned or managed by immigrants. So it's, by people who are not born in this country, let me put it like that. So it's quite complex. I think the Islamic element's gone now, and I think it's a wider issue. It's a race issue, to be blunt. It's people who don't look like us. Why should they be here? And the easiest targets are the hotels where asylum seekers are accommodated. But it's not just there. So we pride ourselves in Britain on good race relations. And what the cities that are targeted so far, I've counted 16 cities where there seem to be problems. It's not nationwide, but it is in a lot of places. The 16 cities that I've noticed where the mobs are on the streets, let's put it like that, all have a complicated ethnic mix of people. So, and also many of them seem to have hotels accommodating illegal immigrants. So it's become an issue of ethnicity, race, and indeed immigration in general.
We're seeing far-right protests just following an end to 14 Conservative years' rule. Anti-far-right groups argue that these are outpourings of legitimate anger. But Nick, can a Labour Party that has only been in the government the past 4 weeks be blamed for this? How do you foresee this playing out for Starmer and his party?
Well, it's certainly a big challenge for the new Prime Minister, who is just marking his first month in office. And I think he, like the rest of us, didn't see this one coming. But then, as you know, this was triggered by a criminal event, the killing of 3 children in a northern city, Southport. Quite why it's become this massive protest movement is a little hard to gauge. And it's certainly a very big challenge for the Prime Minister, particularly since the Prime Minister has already junked the policy of the previous government with regard to illegal immigration. And this protest seems largely to take the form of an attack on illegal immigrants. The mob, as I shall call them, because it's not at all clear whether they belong to one organization or whether they're a collection of disenchanted people. But their major target seems to be the hotels where asylum seekers are have been placed. So they've jumped, you could say, from the protest at the killing of 3 young children and made this a sort of anti-immigration protest, and especially anti-illegal immigration, the people who arrive by boats. And that's something that the government have not yet told us in detail what their policy will be. As you may recall, they junked the policy of the previous government to send what are known as failed asylum seekers to Rwanda. So they've junked the previous policy, but we're not at all clear how this government are going to progress the situation of the large number of especially illegal arrivals in Britain.
Meanwhile, Nigel Farage has criticised the government for blaming it on a few far-right thugs. But Nick, tell us, how are the recent UK riots impacting the political landscape, particularly in terms of shifting public opinion and also influencing party dynamics?
I think there's relatively little support for people who go on the streets, attack vehicles, attack shops, loot from shops, set fire to premises, including a library and a police station. I don't think that's going to win public support. It's not the way to win public support. So I don't think this will gather widespread support. But of course, it's worrying that some people are prepared to do these things just to make their points. I think what we're likely to hear over the next few days is a clearer indication of whether it's one particular organization that is organizing these things,
Right.
like the English Defence League. That's been named as a suspect in this. But I don't think it's going to change public opinion. And I don't think, I mean, the government's not going to fall. We have a new government and they have a lot of good ideas that seem to have won them the support that was demonstrated in the election. So I think we are all looking to the government to see what steps they can take to bring things under control, whilst supporting the police in their efforts to bring things under control locally. Right. I think my own suspicion is this will peter out after a few days, but we will have learned quite a lot of lessons from it.
Right, Nicholas Nugent, as always, thank you so much for making time for us. We will, of course, revert to you for regular updates. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Keir Starmer strongly condemned the attack on a hotel housing asylum seekers that actually saw at least 10 police officers injured, one seriously, and Mr. Starmer described it as far-right thuggery. In a statement from 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister vowed that the authorities will do whatever it takes to bring these thugs to justice, and that justice will be swift. My colleague Radhika Iyer reports from the UK.
One month into office as Prime Minister of Britain, Sir Keir Starmer's biggest challenge is currently underway. Britain has not seen rioting and social unrest of this kind after riots broke out in multiple cities by far-right protesters and anti-immigrant protesters. Cities such as Manchester, Hull, Belfast, Bristol, Stoke-on-Trent, even parts of London has seen sporadic, spontaneous protesters disrupting violence, breaking public property, attacking the police. 90 arrests have been made thus far, and on this weekend, if you are driving across cities such as London and other main cities in the UK, there are the greater chances that you may be giving way to fastly moving, roving policemen in their cars with sirens burning. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has said that these protests are sowing hate. He and the Home Secretary and the entire Labour government that has been newly elected in Britain has offered full support to the police teams to arrest, contain any sort of social unrest that's happening across the cities over the next few days.
I utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt, those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online.
Occupants, mainly tourists, at a South Yorkshire hotel stared in fear and worry from the top floor as rioters attacked that particular hotel in South Yorkshire in England, otherwise a sleepy town and a calm town and a tourist attraction. Through bricks, broke glass windows, even managed to have a fire break out in the hotel. Arrests have been made and the protests in that location have been contained.
Well, it's very shocking to see this sort of racial violence motivated by far-right-wing political extremists. I don't think anything was bad for many years, and it needs to be dealt with robustly.
A rapid response process has been initiated whereby emergency security will be provided across mosques in Britain after racist and anti-immigration protests have worried and disturbed Britain after many, many years. Radhika Iyer in London, NDTV.
Well, news and updates continue on the other side of this very short break. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. The foreign ministers of the G7 major democracies called on all parties involved in the current conflict in the Middle East to avoid actions that could lead to an escalation. In fact, the G7 ministers have expressed strong concern about the recent events that could lead to a wider regional spread of the crisis, starting with Lebanon. This is what an official statement says, as tensions heightened in the Middle East, with the US actually moving warships to the region to defend Israel if Iran attacks, while several Western governments urgently told their citizens to leave Lebanon as Hezbollah launched a barrage of strikes targeting Israel. France warned of a highly volatile situation following last week's Israeli airstrike on a Beirut building that killed a Hezbollah commander, Fouad Shukr. And hours later, Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated as per Gaza in Tehran in a killing that Iran blamed on Israel. Now, while India has put out travel advisories, as we have extensively covered, the United States, France, Canada and Britain all told their citizens to leave Lebanon, and neighbouring Jordan also did so. Several airlines, meanwhile, have suspended or curtailed service to the region. But the White House maintains that their goal is de-escalation and deterrence, further adding that their goal is to defend Israel. It's the defence of Israel. For further clarity, we have with us Voice of America's Linda Gradstein. Thanks so much, Linda, for making time for us on the World 24/7. What are you picking up on in terms of retaliation from Iran? Will there be a collective strike from all of the proxies of Iran in the Middle East? Anything you're picking up on at the moment?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of tension and everybody is kind of expecting it any moment. The latest kind of rumors going around is that it's going to happen on Monday. I don't know what that's based on, but the sense is that it's going to be both Iran itself, which, does raise the level of the response significantly, and its proxies as well, meaning Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and maybe Iraq as well. And so, there's a lot of kind of threats and counter threats going on. Iran is threatening that it will respond. And Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu a few minutes ago just said, well, if Iran responds, we'll hit back even harder. So there is a lot of tension, but the expectation is that it's likely to be both Iran itself and its proxies.
But Jordan, one of Israel's key allies, has sent its foreign minister to Tehran. And actually, reports suggest that Iran has refused for any negotiations as far as retaliation is concerned. Has there been a response to this yet, Linda?
Well, I think, Israel feels that the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh was, it sort of brought back some of Israeli deterrence, which has been really destroyed on October 7th when 3,000, Hamas gunmen just kind of came into Israel, took over some of these kibbutzim, these communities, killed 1,200 people. So there was a sense that Israelis were feeling very insecure. And I think have that assassination, even though they knew that there's likely to be an Iranian response, I think made Israelis feel that Israel still has intelligence capabilities, still has technological capabilities. I'm not sure what it does in terms of Israel's goal to get rid of Hamas as a military power, because Haniyeh will be replaced, but at the same time, Israel has repeatedly vowed that they will get to everyone who was involved in the October 7th attack. And at this point, the only one still alive, apparently, is Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, who's somewhere in a tunnel, supposedly. So I think that, people are nervous, but they feel that Israel can, fight back against any Iranian strike. There's a sense that nobody wants a full-scale war, not Iran, not Israel, not Hezbollah, not Lebanon, not the United States. So the question is just going to be, is it going to be a kind of response? We saw this in April when Israel killed several Revolutionary Guard people, and then Iran fired 300 missiles at Israel, which were shot down by both Israel, the United States, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. So the question is that going to happen again? Is there still that international coalition? And that's what's not clear.
Well, crucial 24 hours up ahead. Thanks so much, Linda, as always, for joining us. Meanwhile, fighting raged on in Gaza as the Israeli war with Hamas nears the 10-month mark with no end in sight. With that, let's turn our attention now to the United States. Kamala Harris interviewed 3 VP contenders after she became the official Democratic presidential nominee. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly met with Kamala Harris in D.C., and she is expected to announce her choice imminently. But each man brings distinct advantages. Kelly could elevate gun violence as a campaign issue and bring swing voters in Arizona along with Walz, who's a galvanizing voice who minted the weird attack on Donald Trump and his running mate. The highly popular Shapiro, meanwhile, could help secure Pennsylvania, a state Democrats almost certainly have to win. But the in-person meeting, described as a chemistry test, was the final step in the search, but one that Kamala Harris is expected to put considerable stock in. Aides and associates have said that she often prioritizes personal rapport with her staff as well as her advisors. In other news, Ukraine has received its first American-made F-16 fighter jets. This is what President Volodymyr Zelensky has confirmed. Ukraine's leader thanked allies for what they were once very hesitant to provide, though he added that many more were needed. The arrival of the jets marks a crucial milestone in boosting the capabilities of Ukraine's Air Force, which largely relies on old Soviet-era jets. Well, thank you so much for investing your time in watching this episode of The World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest for you. Do stay tuned.